Moonlight, a 2016 film directed by Barry Jenkins, stars a young Sharon as he grows up in Miami, his life portrayed for the audience, along with all the hardships he has had to endure. This film stands out as an outstanding achievement in depicting societal troubles for the people living in Miami, and also for the black youth growing up in an unhealthy environment, finding instead the people in his life who treat him right. Furthermore, the emotional core of this movie touches deeply upon the inner turmoil caused by the destructive force of bad parenthood, unhealthy school environments, and trying to fit into a society that casts you out. For a melodrama, there are quite a lot of distinct elements that separate it and make it stand out as a film, such as the distinct focus on psychological locations, the distinction as a mix of social and family melodramas, and the divergences this film creates from classical narratives. Locations are vital in the creation of a certain aesthetic for a film that, if used correctly, creates a semblance of the main plights of the characters and highlights the themes rather well. Moonlight uses this to great effect in multiple of the scenes to create a juxtaposition between the positive and negative aspects of his life. For example, there is a very distinct usage of staging and mise-en-scène that makes the areas of Sharon's life different, in that the areas of his life that are disorganized and closed in are parts that are negative aspects, while areas that are more open and airy end up being settings of positive emotions in his life. To elaborate, there is a specific scene where Sharon is being surrounded by the bullies who have been harassing him all his life, and whilst this takes place in a very open area, the blocking of the two other characters makes it so that the space is very confined within the shots. The houses are probably the most obvious comparison of this point, as Sharon's house is very small and cramped in comparison to Juan's house, and subsequently, the way he is treated in both houses are very different. It seems that the more cramped areas end up being the more oppressive in nature, with one of the most open scenes, the beach scene, being one of the most kind and sweet moments in the main character's life. Some characters even transition from a cramped state of being into an open state of being, such as Sharon's mother, who inhabited the small spaces of a car and the house earlier in the film, but then by the end of the film ends up transferring to the open air of the rehab center and subsequently becoming a better person. As stated prior, this movie is a melodrama, but it seems to share a lot of the same qualities within it to stand out amongst any other drama created. For starters, there is the subject matter of LGBTQ+ in an unrelentingly homophobic community, which ties into the implication that this film is a social melodrama, showing off the effects of systemic hate for anyone LGBTQ+, and also of the toxic masculinity rife within the depicted community. But this film also deals with the forces of family and how they restrict the main character, which ties into it being a family melodrama as well. As a hybrid of both dramas, this film is able to explore more of the effects Sharon can experience as he grows up, allowing for different avenues of conflict. For instance, there is a conflict present within most of the film where Sharon's mother has a strong distaste for Juan and the loving support that he provides, as she wants to be treated as the only family that would care, when clearly the dissonance in her actions proves otherwise. This conflict is prevalent of the family drama taking place, while the bullying and torment he gets at school shows off the societal effects of even stepping a bit out of the line of being completely masculine. One very particular thing about melodramas that is different from how Moonlight is presented is the fact that instead of already having a character that is influenced by the world around them, the movie is essentially about the process happening before us. Then it shows that a particular character is not defined just by the climate that they lived in. Sharon has all the elements in his life change him, and he took the better traits from the good influences in his life to do so, while still keeping some integral parts of his core personality till the end. This movie is not necessarily depicted quite like the classical film narrative. Instead of focusing on a character's particular goal, what it does is follow the progressing events of someone's life and character arc as they grow into adulthood. This of course means that the most important aspects of Sharon and of the narrative are that of the character progression and change. The most obvious of these changes is that of the external changes, which are very apparent in the last chapter of the film. For most of the film, the main character could be described as very meek and not extremely confident in himself, getting bullied often and treated horribly by the people around him who should be better to him. Once he decides to take matters into his own hands, right before the final chapter, we see that one arc had finished, showing an internal change as he grows to be more confident. Once we see that he came back from being in a juvenile prison, he had ended up changing his life, so he appeared to be more masculine and hard, wearing grills and purchasing a muscle car to show it. The internal struggle and the internal change that happens is that he comes to accept the fact that he is different and should love himself, shown explicitly by the final scene in Kevin's apartment, where he lays bare his vulnerability to the love Kevin showed him all those years ago, and how he had never really changed. All in all, Moonlight proves itself to be one of the most impactful presentations of growing up in an abusive house and community that we have seen in many years. It is not overly indulgent to say the film has affected me, with how much I felt the strife and heartache of Sharon living in a world where everything is out to get him, to judge him, to beat him down, just for trying to exist. It is a film that broke my heart, and a film that built my heart back up again, because despite all he has been through, he was still able to make it, and still able to be himself.